I wanted to share a few reflections around this post because I think some of the ideas can be a bit unfamiliar at first, specifically when trying to understand what we mean by these big ambiguous terms, movement practice, or movement-oriented approach. I chose to start with fitness as a reference because it's the main cultural lens that many of us have inherited when thinking about the body or when thinking about physicality. One of the more important distinctions that I wanted to start with is that movement is not something that we can push or force back into fitness. It's actually the other way around. Fitness ends up being nestled inside of movement. And this is something that I see regularly when I look out in the world and I see how movement is being represented. It's represented as movements, things that we do that are isolated in skill or meant to represent some particular outcome, yet it's not encapsulating this unique wholeness that movement is meant to offer. It doesn't mean that fitness is wrong when we think about this nestling or this being smaller than movement. It just means that it's incomplete. And like I said, fitness culture tends to narrow the conversation of the body towards isolated outcomes, strength, flexibility, aesthetics, performance, body comp, and so on. None of these are bad and they can all be valuable, but they don't represent the whole picture. And what we're calling the whole picture in this case is movement, this larger perspective, this larger ongoing study. Implicitly, the question fitness often asks is, how can I improve the look or performance of the parts? What we're more interested in through a movement lens is, how do these parts participate in the use of the whole? This shift in this way of viewing changes everything. When we start to relate to the body more holistically, many of the original qualities that we were looking for, things like strength, mobility, ease, coordination, adaptation, or even just health and vitality, which are fundamental to those things, often begin to naturally emerge through the process itself. At the Movement Standard, one of the things that we've found to be such a crucial part of this ongoing shift is developing awareness and observation inside of practice itself. Those become foundational skills that help us to start perceiving ourselves differently and relating to the body in a new way. One of the questions that comes from this shift is, instead of asking, am I fit, for example, what if we asked, how available am I? Available to sense, to move, to learn, to adapt. This availability offers us a degree of freedom that then we can move within. In that, movement's not something that we can really fully pin down. The target is always changing, and our ability to stay in the relationship with that changing process is what I would call practice. Maybe I'm working towards a handstand. Maybe I want more range of motion. Maybe I want to change my body aesthetically. Those goals are completely fine. They show up inside of a movement practice. They can show up inside of fitness as well. But it's how we relate to the process that matters. I can pursue a handstand from a purely outcome-oriented perspective, eventually achieve this shape while never really changing my relationship to myself in the process. To me, it's one of the deeper invitations of movement practice. It becomes less about forcing outcomes and more about entering into a conversation with yourself through the body, through sensation, attention, coordination, challenge, frustration, refinement, and ongoing discovery. Movement starts becoming a way of studying how we participate. And you might be thinking, well, can't I do that inside of fitness? Yes, you can change how you relate, but when you start to change how you relate, you realize that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and that underneath this wholeness is an ongoing process and evolution of complexity that can't often be found in a parts-based approach. One of the closing ideas in this post is, we're not trying to do less, we're attempting to see more. And in many ways, there's actually more happening within that movement-oriented approach. More awareness, more refinement, more discovery, more participation, and then ongoing complexity. Over time, this begins to extend beyond practice itself. It's who and what we are, so it naturally shows up in what we would call the rest of life. Most people I talk with who are interested in improving their fitness, I see them as ultimately looking for something deeper underneath it all. They want to experience themselves differently. They want to feel different in their day-to-day ways of using in an alive and an embodied way. Fitness can absolutely be an entry point into that. I'll say it was one of my main entry points, but I saw it only as one doorway. So the question I'll leave you with is this: what would change if your physical practice became less about improving the body and more about studying your relationship to it? And just to be clear, there's nothing wrong with improving the body. But when we begin studying our relationship to it, many of the changes we're seeking often begin to emerge naturally as a byproduct of the process itself. And the key distinction of a movement-oriented approach is having a process that is guided through this specific lens. Hopefully this offers a useful reflection to complement the post and something meaningful to carry into your practice in the days ahead.